The roar of the obsidian arena was not merely a sound, it was a physical pressure that vibrated in the marrow of the bone. 80,000 throats screamed in a dozen different galactic dialects, a cacophony of bloodlust that rose into the smog-choked orange sky of Karzul. Above the seating tiers, massive hologlyphs floated like ghosts, projecting the betting odds in neon violet and acidic green, flickering with every spill of blood on the black sand below. Ronan Vale stood in the center of the pit, the heat of the binary suns baking the sweat into a second skin across his back. The biotech collar clamped around his neck pulsed with a dull, rhythmic throb, a constant reminder of his status. He was property. He was meat. But today, he was also the favorite. His opponent was a draconian shock trooper, a towering mass of scales and kinetic muscle standing nearly 8 feet tall, wielding a jagged mace that looked heavy enough to crush a tank. The creature lunged, a guttural roar tearing from its throat. Ronan did not panic. Panic was a luxury for free men. He moved with the brutal economy of a machine, sliding under the arc of the mace. The wind of the weapon's passage ruffled his hair. He pivoted on his heel, driving a stiffened palm into the nerve cluster beneath the alien's armpit. It was a precise surgical strike. The draconian howled, the limb going dead instantly, the mace clattering to the obsidian floor. The crowd surged, a wave of noise. They wanted the finish. They wanted the red spray. Ronan swept the creature's legs, sending the massive alien crashing into the dust. He was on top of it in a heartbeat, his forearm pressed against the draconian's windpipe. The alien thrashed, eyes wide with the primal fear of death, but Ronan held him pinned, staring down with eyes the color of cold iron. Finish him. The hologlyphs flashed. Kill, kill, kill. The nobles in the high boxes leaned forward, their jewelry glittering, hungry for the snap of vertebrae. Ronan tightened his grip, feeling the alien's pulse hammer against his skin. Then, he let go. He stood up, backing away with his hands raised, palms open. He would not kill a defeated enemy for sport. He had done many things to survive the slave pits of Karzul, but he had never let them take his soul. The silence that followed was heavier than the screaming had been. Then came the boos, a rain of debris and insults. But beneath the anger, there was a low, grudging rumble of respect from the warrior castes. Ronan Vale was undefeated, but more dangerous than that, he was unpredictable. 2 judge drones hovered down, their red optical sensors scanning the living draconian. They turned to Ronan, buzzing with irritation, and fired a localized shock through his collar. Ronan gritted his teeth, his neck muscles straining as the voltage arced through him. But he did not fall. He stood amidst the hatred and the glory, looking up at the highest spire of the citadel, where the masters of this world played their games with living pieces. High above the stench of the arena, behind a wall of polarized transparency steel, Princess Kaya Drath watched the feed with eyes that revealed nothing. The air in her private sanctum was cool, scented with ozone and crushed lilies, a stark contrast to the brutality below. She sat on a floating divan, her posture rigid. Her left leg was extended, encased in a sleek matte black framework of metal and light. The anti-grav brace hummed softly, a sound she had learned to tune out during the day but which haunted her in the silence of the night. It was a marvel of engineering, capable of crushing stone or allowing her to leap great distances. But to the High Council, it was just a gilded crutch. She watched the human, Ronan Vale, take the shock without falling. He is foolish, she thought, her fingers tracing the rim of a crystal goblet. Mercy in the arena is just a slower form of suicide. Yet, she did not look away. She was tired of the violence, tired of the politics, and quietly, desperately tired of being pitied. A sharp pain flared in her leg, not from the brace but from the memory of the nerve damage beneath it. The flashback hit her like a physical blow, a shard of the past slicing through the present. She was back on the moon of Vraxos, the smell of burning ozone, the ambush, the bridge of living metal groaning under the bombardment. She was running, leading the charge, feeling the exhilaration of command. Then the explosion, the world tilting sideways. The sensation of her leg being crushed, bone turning to powder, the scream trapped in her throat. Then, through the smoke and the agony, a shadow. Her father, Vael Drath, the Warlord. He had waded through the fire, his armor scorched, lifting her broken body as if she weighed no more than a breath. He had carried her 3 miles to the evac zone, refusing to let the medics take her until they were safe. It was love wrapped in command, a ferocity of protection that had saved her life but doomed her future. The memory faded, leaving her breathless. Kaya gripped her knee, the metal of the brace cold under her palm. Since that day, the whispers had started. The council houses claimed Vael's line was unstable. They called her the broken princess. They smiled to her face and sharpened their knives when she turned away. A chime at the door broke her reverie. Her personal attendant, a slender biological construct with pearlescent skin, glided in. The High Council has convened. Princess, the construct said, Lord Vael requests your presence. Kaya stood, the brace whirred, adjusting to her weight. She smoothed the fabric of her ceremonial uniform, checking the hidden daggers in her sleeves. Let them look, she thought, hardening her heart. Let them see the metal and think I am weak. That will be the last mistake they make. The council chamber was a cavernous hall of polished basalt, lit by floating orbs of cold fire. The heads of the 12 noble houses sat on raised platforms, arranged in a semicircle around the central dais where Vael Drath sat on the Warlord's throne. Vael was a terrifying figure, a monolith of scarred muscle and intellect who had ruled Karzul for 40 years. But today, the sharks were circling. Kaya entered, the rhythmic heavy step of her brace echoing on the stone. She took her place at the foot of the throne, chin lifted. She could feel the gaze of Lord Malachor, the head of the rival faction. He looked at her leg with a mixture of mock sympathy and calculation. My Lord Warlord, Malachor said, his voice like oil sliding over gravel. We only seek to ensure the stability of the realm. Princess Kaya's condition renders her vulnerable. A marriage alliance is necessary. House Soren offers their 3rd son. He would be a strong protector. A protector. It was a polite word for a jailer. Kaya's hands curled into fists at her sides. They wanted to marry her off to a minor noble, sideline her, and wait for Vael to die so they could tear the empire apart. Vael remained silent. He held a data slate in his hand, his thumb scrolling idly. He knew what Malachor did not. He knew about the encrypted votes traded in the dark web of the lower city. He knew about the bribed officers in the docking bays. He knew about the planned accident with the atmospheric regulators that was meant to suffocate Kaya in her sleep within the week. If he played by their rules, his daughter was dead. If he fought them openly, civil war would burn the planet to ash. Vael set the data slate down. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I have considered your counsel, Vael rumbled. His voice was deep, resonating in the chest of everyone present. You believe my daughter requires a shield. You believe her strength is insufficient. We only wish to serve, Malachor said, bowing his head to hide his smile. Then I shall grant her a shield, Vael said. But I will not bind her to a house that seeks to undermine my authority. I will not shackle her to a noble who thinks he is doing me a favor by taking a cripple into his bed. The silence in the room grew brittle. Kaya looked up at her father, a flicker of unease tightening her chest. I have chosen a consort who owes allegiance to no house, Vial announced, standing up. A consort whose strength is proven in blood, not in backroom whispers. He gestured to the heavy doors. Bring him in. The doors groaned open. 2 guards dragged a figure into the light. It was Ronan Vale. He was still wearing his arena armor, the dust of the pit clinging to his skin, the stasis cuffs locking his wrists behind his back. He blinked against the harsh light, looking from the nobles to the warlord, his expression wary but unbowed. Vial looked at the council, his eyes burning with a cold, terrifying amusement. He was about to flip the game board. He was about to make a move that was so offensive, so scandalous, that it would act as a perfect shield. No noble would dare touch Kaya now, for she would be tainted by the lowest caste. It was social suicide, but it was physical survival. The herald stepped forward, unfurling a holographic scroll. His voice was mechanically amplified, booming through the chamber and simultaneously, broadcasting to every screen, holopad, and comms unit on the planet. By decree of Vial Drath, Warlord of Karzul, the succession is secured, to ensure the strength of the bloodline and the protection of the heir. The herald paused, as if he could not believe the words scrolling before his eyes. He cleared his throat and read the headline that would ignite a firestorm. The alien warlord gave his crippled daughter to the strongest human slave. No one expected his choice. The reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled through the room like a shockwave. Lord Malachor stood up so fast his chair toppled over. Laughter bubbled up from the back rows, nervous, shocked laughter before being strangled by the sheer audacity of the insult. A slave? Malachor sputtered, his face turning a dark shade of violet. You bond a princess of the blood to a gladiator? Kaya stood frozen. The words hung in the air, pressing down on her. Given. The word tasted like ash. She stared at Ronan, who looked equally stunned, his jaw tightening as he realized the magnitude of the trap he had just walked into. Kaya's hand found the metal railing of the dais. She squeezed. The metal groaned and then buckled, twisting under the hydraulic pressure of her grip until it snapped with a sharp ping. Vial ignored the outrage. Step forward. Ronan Vale. The guards shoved Ronan toward the dais. The judge drones hovered closer, locking him in place. Ronan looked up, meeting Kaya's gaze. He saw the fury there, hot and white, but he also saw the fear she was trying to hide. He didn't speak. He just stood there, the strongest man in the arena, now reduced to a pawn in a game he didn't understand. Kaya stepped forward, the sound of her brace heavy and deliberate. She stopped inches from Ronan, her eyes searching his. He smelled of sweat and copper. He was a human, a slave. And now, her husband. She turned to her father, her voice trembling with a rage she could barely control. Is this your protection? You shame me before the galaxy to save me from a political marriage? It is not shame, Kaya, Vial said, his voice dropping so only she and Ronan could hear. It is armor. No noble will touch you now. You are unclean to them. You are safe. I am not property, Kaya hissed. No, Vial said coldly. You are a soldier, and this is war. The private confrontation in the Warlord's study an hour later was less diplomatic. You have ruined me, Kaya shouted, throwing a heavy jade sculpture across the room. It shattered against the wall, but Vial did not flinch. I have kept you alive, Vial said, pouring himself a drink. The council planned to kill you in 3 days. The accident was arranged. By bonding you to the human. I have made you worthless as a hostage and impossible to marry for power. You are off the board. And what of him? Kaya gestured to the surveillance screen where Ronan was being held in a luxury suite that looked more like a gilded cage. He is a slave. He hates us. He is a survivor, Vielle said, and he has a code. I watched him in the arena. He did not kill when he could have. He will not harm you. He might kill me in my sleep just to spite you. Then do not sleep, Vielle said, taking a sip. Or learn to make him loyal. You are a strategist. Kaya, figure it out. Down in the guest quarters. Ronan Vale was pacing. The room was opulent, filled with silks and strange, glowing art. But the door was locked, and there were guards outside. A medical drone had visited him 10 minutes ago, injecting a universal translator implant into the base of his skull. It was still calibrating, sending odd static buzzes through his auditory nerves. The door hissed open. Kaya stormed in, her anti-grav brace humming aggressively. She looked like a storm cloud poured into a uniform. Ronan stopped pacing. He crossed his arms, leaning against a marble pillar. So, he said, his voice raspy. Princess, do not speak to me, Kaya snapped. You are a tool, a blunt instrument my father bought to insult his enemies. Do not think this bond makes us equals. Ronan tilted his head. The translator chip buzzed. What he heard was, do not serenade me. You are a utensil, a heavy musical instrument my progenitor acquired to dazzle his rivals. Do not think this harmony makes us symmetrical. Ronan blinked. He wasn't sure if he should laugh or be offended. I think your translator is broken, he said. Or you have a very strange way of flirting. Kaya's eyes narrowed. Flirting? I just threatened to have you spaced. The chip buzzed again. Ronan heard. I just proposed to have you suspended in the stars. Ronan couldn't help it. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Suspended in the stars sounds romantic, princess. But I prefer solid ground. Kaya stared at him, confused by his amusement. She took a step closer, her hand resting on the hilt of the dagger at her waist. You find this funny? My life is in ruins. And you find this funny? No, Ronan said, his face sobering. The humor vanished. I don't find slavery funny. I don't find being used as a pawn funny. But if I don't laugh at the absurdity of this, I'm going to tear this room apart with my bare hands. So, I'm laughing. Kaya paused. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the white-knuckle grip he had on his own temper. He was just as trapped as she was. We go to the training hall, she said abruptly. What? If you are to be my shield, I need to know if you can actually fight, or if the arena is just theater. The training hall was a vast circular chamber with a floor of impact-absorbent gel. Racks of weapons lined the walls. Kaya threw a training staff to Ronan. He caught it with one hand. She ignited a plasma baton, the energy crackling violet. Defend yourself, she ordered. She didn't wait. She launched herself at him, a blur of motion. The brace allowed her to move with terrifying speed, propelling her into aerial strikes that no human could replicate. Ronan blocked, parried, and sidestepped. He was fast, faster than she expected. He absorbed the heavy blows with the staff, turning the force aside rather than meeting it head-on. Kaya pressed harder, her frustration bleeding into her fighting style. She wanted to hit something. She wanted to hurt something. She spun, the metal leg swinging around in a crushing arc aimed at his ribs. Ronan ducked, the wind of the kick ruffling his hair. He rolled and came up behind her. She whirled around, off balance for a fraction of a second. Her injured leg buckled slightly as the brace's gyro adjusted. It was a microsecond of vulnerability. A seasoned killer would have swept the leg, shattering the mechanism and putting her on the ground. Ronan saw the opening. His staff moved, but instead of striking the leg, he slammed the staff into the ground a mere inch from her boot, creating a barrier that she could lean against to regain her balance. Kaya froze. She stared at the staff, then up at him. "You missed," she said, breathless. "I didn't miss," Ronan said, his chest heaving. "I adjusted. Why?" "Because you were falling," Ronan said simply, and the prompt said, "I'm your shield consort." "Shields don't trip their charges." Kaya stared at him, the violet light of the baton reflecting in her eyes. The translator didn't glitch this time. The words hung between them, clear and heavy. He could have humiliated her. He could have proven he was physically superior. Instead, he had covered her weakness. She lowered the baton. They stood one breath apart, the heat of their exertion radiating in the small space between them. For the first time, she didn't see a slave. She saw a man. Ronan looked down at her. Her eyes were gold, flecked with green, fierce and intelligent. He felt a strange pull, a magnetic tension that had nothing to do with combat. His hand twitched, an instinct to reach out, to brush a stray lock of hair from her forehead. He killed the thought instantly. She was the warlord's daughter. He was the property. "Good reflexes," Kaya said, her voice unusually soft. "You're not so bad yourself, for a—" Ronan trailed off. "For a cripple?" Kaya challenged, though there was no venom in it. "I was going to say for a royal," Ronan corrected. The air shifted, the moment stretched, fragile and charged. Then, the window shattered. It wasn't a sound. It was an explosion of diamond dust as the reinforced transparency steel disintegrated. A dark shape blurred into the room, a sleek, arachnid drone, its mandibles dripping with neurotoxin, red eyes locked onto Kaya's throat. Kaya was fast, but she was on her back foot, her weapon lowered. The drone shrieked, launching itself through the air. Ronan didn't think. He didn't weigh the odds. He moved with the explosive power that had made him a legend in the arena. He tackled Kaya. His shoulder hit her midsection, driving her sideways just as the drone slashed through the space where her neck had been. They crashed onto the floor, Ronan twisting his body to take the impact, shielding her with his own mass. The drone skidded across the floor, claws gouging the gel, and turned for a second strike. Ronan scrambled up, placing himself between the princess and the machine. He held the training staff like a spear, the glass crunching under his boots, the starlight from the broken window washing over them in a cold, blue tide. "Get behind me," Ronan growled. Kaya lay on the floor for a split second, looking at his back. He had no armor, no shield, only a wooden stick and a defiance that burned brighter than the plasma weapon in her hand. She scrambled to her feet, igniting her baton. "No," she said, stepping up beside him, not behind him. Together, they faced the dark, the shattered glass of the training hall still crunched under their boots when the warlord's personal guard arrived. They did not come to arrest the assassin. The drone was already a smoking pile of twisted circuitry on the floor, but to escort the survivors to the throne room. Kaya stood amidst the debris, her chest heaving, the adrenaline slowly curdling into a cold, sharp fury. She looked at Ronan. He was bleeding from a shallow cut on his cheek where a shard of glass had grazed him, but he was standing with the relaxed alertness of a predator who had just confirmed he was not at the bottom of the food chain. He had saved her, not because he was programmed to, but because he had chosen to. That terrified her more than the drone. Vile Drath sat on his throne, his face unreadable as the report was delivered. He looked at the wreckage of the drone displayed on a holoscreen, then at his daughter, and finally at the slave. "You reacted with adequate speed," Viel said, His voice was devoid of praise, merely stating a tactical fact. "I did what was necessary," Ronan replied, his voice rough. Vial stood up and descended the dais. He stopped in front of Ronan. The massive alien warlord towered over the human, casting a shadow that swallowed him whole. "Property does not choose to save its master," Vial rumbled. "Property functions. You chose. Therefore, you cannot remain property." Vial gestured to a medic droid hovering nearby. "Remove the collar." The command sucked the air out of the room. Kaya stepped forward, her brace humming sharply with the sudden movement. "Father, you cannot just release him," she argued, though she wasn't sure why she was arguing. Perhaps because the collar was the only thing that guaranteed he wouldn't kill them all in their sleep. "I am not releasing him," Vial said, his eyes never leaving Ronan's. "I am repurposing him." The medic droid descended, its multi-jointed arms extending. A laser scalpel hummed to life. Ronan flinched, not out of fear but out of instinct, as the cold metal touched the sensitive skin of his neck. There was a high-pitched whine, a scent of burning ozone, and then a heavy metallic clank as the biotech collar, the symbol of his enslavement for 5 years, fell to the floor. Ronan reached up, his hand trembling slightly, to touch the raw, pale skin where the metal had been. He took a breath, a deep, ragged inhale that felt different, unrestricted. He was free. Then Vial grabbed Ronan's right wrist. "But a weapon must be aimed," the warlord said. Before Ronan could pull away, Vial pressed a device against the inside of Ronan's forearm. A searing pain shot up his arm, hotter than a branding iron. Ronan gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out, his knees buckling slightly from the agony. When Vial pulled away, a complex glowing mark was burned into the flesh. It was a geometric weave of crimson and gold, pulsing faintly in time with Ronan's heartbeat. "The bond mark," Vial declared. "It grants you legal personhood under the High Council laws. You are no longer a slave. You are a citizen of Karzul. But this mark also binds your life signature to the House of Drath, specifically to her." Vial pointed at Kaya. "If her heart stops, yours stops," Vial said simply. "If she commands you, the mark will compel you. You have your freedom, Ronan Vale. But she holds the leash." Ronan stared at the mark on his arm, the red light casting a sickly glow on his skin. He looked up at Kaya. The gratitude he had felt seconds ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard knot of anger. He wasn't free. He had just been traded from a cage to a longer chain. Kaya looked at the mark, then at her father. She felt a surge of nausea. This was not a partnership. It was coercion painted as a gift. She hated the optics of it. She hated that her safety required another shackle. "Thank you, my lord," Ronan said, the words dripping with acid. "I have always wanted to be a dog with a golden collar." Vial smiled, a terrifying baring of teeth. Be a wolf, human. Dogs die in this palace. The anger between Kaya and Ronan was a physical thing, a wall of static that made the air in the corridors feel thick. As they walked away from the throne room, Kaya refused to look at him. She marched with a furious cadence, the heavy thud whir of her brace setting a punishing pace. Ronan kept up easily, rubbing his wrist. "So," he said, his voice echoing in the stone hallway, "I save your life, and my reward is that I die if you die. That is a hell of an incentive program you people run." "It was not my choice," Kaya snapped, stopping so abruptly that Ronan almost walked into her. "I did not ask for this. I did not ask for you. And I did not ask to be the nursemaid to a princess with a death wish," Ronan countered, stepping into her space. "But here we are." "So, Unless you want to test if this mark can actually stop my heart, I suggest you tell me where we are going. We are going to the reception hall, Kaya said, smoothing her uniform with trembling hands. The council is gathering to celebrate the Festival of Three Suns. We must make an appearance. And I am what? The party favor? You are my escort, Kaya said, regaining her icy composure, and you will not embarrass me. The reception hall was an assault on the senses. Light refracted through prism glass walls, casting rainbows over a crowd of 300 nobles. The air smelled of exotic spices and expensive perfumes designed to mask the scent of ambition. As Kaya and Ronan entered, the conversation died. Hundreds of eyes turned toward them. The gaze of the court was heavy, judgmental, and cruel. They looked at Kaya's leg. They looked at Ronan's wrist. "Walk beside me," Kaya whispered, her lips barely moving. "Do not trail behind. You are not a servant." Ronan moved up to her shoulder. He felt the hostility in the room. It was different from the arena. In the arena, they wanted his blood. Here, they wanted his dignity. Lord Malachor approached, holding a flute of blue nectar. He was draped in robes of iridescent silk that shimmered with every breath. "Princess Kaya," Malachor said, his voice smooth and poisonous, and her companion. "It is fascinating to see the Warlord's experiment in person." Ronan stood silent, his face a mask of boredom. Malachor turned to Ronan. "In our culture, human, when a lesser being is introduced to a high lord, they kneel." The room went silent. This was the test. If Ronan knelt, he shamed Kaya. If he refused, he risked execution for insolence. Ronan looked at Malachor. He looked at the floor. Then he looked back at Malachor. "I have bad knees," Ronan said deadpan. "Arena injury. Very tragic." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Malachor's smile faltered. "Insolence." Malachor hissed. "You will bow, or I will have your legs broken to help you learn." Kaya stepped forward, placing herself between them. Her hand rested casually on the hilt of her ceremonial dagger. "You misunderstand, Lord Malachor," Kaya said, her voice carrying through the hall. "My consort does not bow to you because he is not bound to you. He is bound to the House of Drath. And in the House of Drath, we do not kneel to equals." She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. She had just called the slave an equal to the High Lord. "Unless," Kaya continued, her voice dropping to a dangerous purr, "you are implying that you are superior to my father's chosen champion? The man who defeated the beast of Vraxos in single combat?" Malachor paled. To challenge Vale's champion was to challenge Vale. "Of course not," Malachor muttered, bowing stiffly. "A misunderstanding." He retreated, vanishing into the crowd. Kaya let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Beside her, Ronan leaned in. "That was impressive," he murmured. "You lie with great conviction." "It is called diplomacy," Kaya whispered back. Ronan scanned the room, his eyes landing on a duke wearing a massive billowing cloak made of purple feathers that dragged 3 feet behind him. "Who is the bird?" Ronan asked. "Duke Oren," Kaya replied. "He controls the grain shipments." "He looks like a curtain with delusions of grandeur," Ronan said. Kaya bit the inside of her cheek. A laugh bubbled up in her throat, sharp and unexpected. She strangled it instantly, turning it into a cough, but the corner of her mouth twitched. "Stop it," she hissed. "He looks like he is about to lay an egg," Ronan added. Kaya turned away, pretending to inspect a tapestry, fighting a smile that threatened to crack her iron mask. For a second, just a second, she wasn't the crippled princess fighting for her life. She was just a woman sharing a joke at a bad party. After an hour of enduring veiled insults, words like fragile, unstable, and pity thrown at her like soft daggers, Kaya couldn't take it anymore. "Come with me," she ordered. She led Ronan out of the hall, through a series of spiraling corridors, until they reached the Grav Gardens. It was a sanctuary of silence. Massive slabs of moss-covered stone floated in the air, suspended by anti-gravity nodes. Water did not flow down. It flowed in suspended streams between the stones, shimmering like liquid glass in the twilight. Bioluminescent vines hung from the ceiling, casting a soft, blue glow over everything. Kaya walked to the edge of a floating platform, looking out over the city below. The wind here was cool and clean. "Why did you bring me here?" Ronan asked, his voice losing its sarcastic edge. The beauty of the place seemed to demand honesty. "Because I wanted to see if you would push me off," Kaya said. Ronan snorted. "If I push you, I die, remember?" Kaya turned to face him. She looked tired. The armor of her persona had slipped, revealing the exhaustion beneath. "They look at me and they see a broken thing," she said quietly. "Every one of them. Malachor, Orin, even my father sometimes. They look at the brace and they calculate how much longer until I fall." Ronan stepped closer. He looked at the brace. It was a rugged, ugly thing compared to the elegance of the garden, but it was strong. "They look at me and see a price tag," Ronan said. "They calculate my odds. They bet on my blood." Kaya looked up at his face. She saw the scars on his neck where the collar had been. She saw the intelligence in his eyes that he hid behind the brute facade. "I hate it," she admitted. "I hate being pitied. And I hate being owned," Ronan said. The silence that fell between them was not hostile. It was a shared recognition of a common enemy. The world wanted to define them by their limitations, her injury, his status. Kaya sat on a stone bench, her leg extending stiffly. The brace whined, a sound of mechanical protest. She winced, reaching down to the control interface on her thigh. "It is misaligned," she muttered. The fight with the drone knocked the stabilizers out. She struggled with the strap, her fingers slipping on the smooth metal. "Let me," Ronan said. Kaya froze. "No, I can do it." Ronan knelt before her. He didn't ask again. He reached out, his hands large and scarred, hovering over the delicate machinery of her leg. He waited. He would not touch her without permission. He was legally bound to obey her, but this was a choice. Kaya looked at his hands. They were hands that had broken necks and crushed skulls, but they were steady. "Touch," she whispered. The word hung in the air, heavy and charged. Ronan lowered his hands. His fingers brushed the skin of her thigh, just above the metal plating. Kaya's breath hitched. His skin was warm, rough with calluses. The contact sent a shock through her that had nothing to do with the electronics. Ronan focused on the brace, but his awareness was entirely on the woman. He could feel the tension in her muscle, the slight tremble of her leg. He carefully adjusted the stabilizer screw, his knuckles grazing her skin with every turn. The intimacy of it was overwhelming. In this culture, to touch a noble was death. To touch the princess was treason. But he was her consort. He was allowed. He looked up. Kaya was watching him. Her pupils were dilated. Her lips parted slightly. The air between them crackled. It was a magnetic pull, a sudden terrifying realization that the anger they shared was dangerously close to passion. Ronan finished the adjustment. He didn't pull away. His hand rested on her knee, his thumb brushing the fabric of her uniform. "Is that better?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes." Kaya breathed. For a moment, Neither of them moved. Ronan leaned in, just an inch. Kaya didn't pull back. The desire was there, sharp and undeniable, a fire kindled in the wreckage of their circumstances. Then, a chime echoed through the garden. Kaya jerked back as if burned. She tapped the comms unit in her ear, her face hardening instantly back into the mask of the princess. "Report," she commanded. Her eyes went wide. She looked at Ronan, the softness gone, replaced by fear. "We have to go. Now." They ran back to the Citadel's command center. Vael was already there, staring at a massive holotable. The room was chaotic. Officers were shouting into headsets. Data streams cascaded down the walls in red alert patterns. "Look," Vael said, pointing at the central screen. It was a news feed. A decree, bearing the official seal of House Drath, was scrolling across the screen. Princess Kaya Drath to wed Lord Malakor's nephew in a gesture of unity. The bond with the human slave is annulled due to mental instability of the princess. "It is a lie," Kaya shouted. "I never agreed to this." "We know," Vael said grimly. "But the seal is authentic. The encryption codes are valid." Ronan stepped up to the table, looking at the code. If the codes are valid, then it wasn't a hack from the outside. Kaya looked at him, then at her father. It came from inside. Vael nodded slowly. "Someone on my personal command staff gave them the keys. We are compromised. The coup is not coming next month." "Kaya, it is happening now. They are trying to delegitimize you before they kill you." "Who?" Kaya asked. Vael looked at his officers, suspicion clouding his eyes. "I do not know, and until I do, no one is safe here." He turned to Kaya. "You must leave. I will not run," Kaya stated. "You are not running," Vael corrected. "You are going on a hunt." Vael tapped a command, and a star map appeared. It showed a remote sector of the galaxy, a dead zone known as the Void of Silence. "There is a legend," Vael said. "The Throne Key, an ancient precursor relic that can overwrite the command codes of the entire fleet. If the Council succeeds in their coup, they will control the Armada. We need an override. It is a myth," Kaya said, "a bedtime story." "It is real," Vael insisted. "My spies found the coordinates. It is located on the moon of Xylos. You will go there, you will retrieve it, and you will bring it back to me. And him?" Kaya pointed at Ronan. "He is your shield," Vael said, "and he is the only one I trust because everyone else here has a political motive. He only has a motive to keep his heart beating." The departure was hurried. They were ushered to a private hangar deep beneath the Citadel. The ship waiting for them was not a standard military vessel. It was a sleek, black shape that seemed to absorb the light. Its hull rippled like muscle. "A biomech scout," Vael said. "It is alive. It has no crew. It answers only to DNA." Kaya limped toward the ramp, her mind racing. She was being sent into exile, chasing a ghost story, with a human slave she was barely starting to understand. She stopped at the airlock and turned to Ronan. The ship's interior smelled of organic compounds and sterile metal. The hatch began to seal, the biological material knitting together like a rib cage closing around a heart. Kaya looked at Ronan. The tension from the garden was gone, replaced by the cold reality of survival. "Listen to me, Ronan," she said, her voice steady. "We are alone now. No guards, no father to protect me. But do not mistake my injury for weakness." She stepped close to him, her eyes hard. "If you betray me," she whispered, "I will end you. I will stop my own heart just to stop yours. Do you understand?" Ronan looked at her. He saw the fear behind the threat. He saw the woman who had been hunted her entire life. He didn't flinch. He didn't mock her. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "If you don't betray me," Ronan said, his voice quiet and absolute. "I won't." The ship sealed with a wet, organic hiss, locking them in the dark together. The engines woke up with a scream, and they blasted off into the void, leaving the world they knew behind. The biomech scout ship, which the onboard AI had identified as the Nighthawk, screamed silently as it tore through the membrane of reality that separated normal space from the forbidden corridor. Outside the organic hull, the universe had dissolved into a bruised kaleidoscope of violet and sick green. Luminous void storms battered the ship's deflector scales, not with wind, but with waves of pure entropy. Kaya sat in the pilot's cradle, her hands gripping the gel interface controls. She could feel the ship's fear. It trembled through the deck plates, a low-frequency vibration that rattled her teeth. The corridor was a tear in the fabric of the galaxy, a place where physics grew bored and laws became suggestions. Time skipped. One moment, Kaya was staring at the nav readout showing 3 hours to destination. The next heartbeat, the chronometer read 10 hours ago, then flickered back to the present. It was like listening to a scratched record, but the record was her own existence. The comms unit crackled with static, but it wasn't white noise. It was voices. "You are weak," the static whispered. It sounded exactly like Kaya's own voice, stripped of all its armor. "You are just a broken doll in a metal frame." Kaya gritted her teeth, boosting the dampeners. "Ignore it," she commanded herself, "that it is just feedback, behind her, in the gunnery well." Ronan was silent, too silent. Kaya turned her chair. Ronan was staring at the bulkhead, his eyes wide and unseeing. His breathing was shallow, rapid, the sound of an animal caught in a trap. His hand was clawing at his throat, scratching at skin that was no longer covered by a collar. "Ronan?" Kaya said. He didn't answer. The ship's internal atmosphere had thickened, heavy with a psionic pressure known as the memory tide. It dredged up the silt from the bottom of a mind and filled the room with it. Ronan wasn't on the ship anymore. He was back in the pits. He could smell the copper tang of blood and the sour reek of unwashed bodies. He could feel the weight of the chains, cold and heavy, dragging his face into the dirt. The roar of the crowd was deafening, overlapping with the whispers from the void. "Kill or die, kill or die." He tried to move, but the phantom chains held him. He was back in the dark, 5 years ago, the first night he had been sold. The despair was a physical weight on his chest, crushing his lungs. "Ronan!" The voice was sharp, a command. He blinked, but the darkness remained. Then, something hard struck his shoulder. Kaya had unstrapped herself and crossed the deck. She didn't touch him gently. She grabbed his shoulder plate and shook him. "Breathe." "Soldier," she ordered, her voice cutting through the hallucination like a blade. "That is a direct order." Ronan gasped, his lungs unlocking. He looked up. The chains dissolved into shadows. He was looking into gold-flecked eyes that held no pity, only a fierce, demanding presence. Ronan stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I was back there." "You are here," Kaya said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming an anchor. "You are on the Nighthawk. You are free. Now, replicate my breathing pattern. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. She exaggerated her own breathing, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Ronan focused on it. He matched it. The panic receded, leaving him shivering. "Good," Kaya said, stepping back. "Keep your mind inside the ship. The void wants you to look backward. Do not let it." She turned to go back to the pilot's chair, but as she stepped, the ship lurched violently. The artificial gravity failed for a second, then slammed back on. Kaya stumbled, her brace whirred, trying to compensate, but the sudden shift threw her equilibrium off. She fell, her knee hitting the deck hard. For a second, the pain was blinding. But then the memory tide surged. The ship vanished. Kaya was on the bridge of Vraxos again. The explosion roared in her ears. She was falling, her leg shattered, the bone white and jagged. But this time, it was worse. She wasn't alone with her father. The entire High Council was there. Lord Malachor was laughing. The nobles were pointing, their faces twisted into masks of disgust. "Look at her," the voices whispered. "Broken, useless, a cripple trying to play at power." She couldn't get up. The metal bridge was burning her skin. She was 12 years old and she was dying, and everyone was watching. She couldn't breathe. The shame was hotter than the fire. Then, a voice. Not a command, a question. "Name 5 real things." Kaya gasped, her eyes squeezing shut against the vision of the burning bridge. "What?" she choked out. "Name 5 real things you can touch right now," the voice said. It was rough, grounded, solid as bedrock. Kaya opened her eyes. The council was gone. Ronan was kneeling in front of her. He wasn't touching her, but his hands were hovering close, creating a perimeter of safety. "The deck," Kaya whispered, her voice shaking. "The plating is cold." "That is one," Ronan said. 4 more. My brace," Kaya said. "It is vibrating." 2. "Keep going." "The air," she said, taking a ragged breath. "It smells like ozone." 3. "You," Kaya said, looking at him. "You are bleeding." Ronan touched his cheek where the cut from the training hall had opened up again. "Just a scratch." 4. "One more." Kaya. Kaya looked at his eyes. They were gray, like the storm clouds over the citadel, but they were calm. "Your eyes," she whispered. 5, Ronan said softly. "You are back." Kaya nodded, the hallucination fading completely. She realized she was gripping his forearm tight enough to bruise. She let go, pulling her hand back as if she had touched fire. She sat up, adjusting her brace with a sharp, mechanical click. She rebuilt her walls instantly, smoothing her uniform, lifting her chin. "We are approaching the coordinates," she said, her voice almost steady. "Prepare for descent." Ronan watched her, seeing the cracks in the armor. But he said nothing. He simply nodded and returned to his station. They had seen each other's ghosts. The bond on his arm pulsed, warm and steady. The moon of Xylos was a corpse of a world. It hung in the void like a bleached skull, its surface a vast ocean of black sand that swallowed the light. Above the dunes, massive ruins floated in defying silence. They were not built of stone, but of a dark, obsidian-like metal that seemed to drink the starlight. The Nighthawk touched down on a plateau of fused glass. The ramp descended with a hiss. Kaya and Ronan stepped out. The gravity was low, about 0.8 of standard. Kaya's brace hummed, adjusting its anti-grav output to match the environment. She moved with a strange, gliding grace here, the heavy machinery of her legs suddenly light. "Keep your weapon hot," Kaya ordered, scanning the horizon with a thermal monocle. "This place is dead, but the archives say the old empire left guardians." Ronan held a heavy pulse rifle, a weapon he had looted from the ship's armory. He didn't like guns. He preferred the weight of a blade or a staff, something he could feel. But he wasn't stupid. They walked toward the largest ruin, a spire that twisted upward into the vacuum like a frozen tornado. As they approached, Ronan noticed the surface of the structure moving. "Look," he said, pointing. Ancient glyphs were crawling across the black metal like living code, shifting and rearranging themselves in patterns that hurt the eyes to follow. "It is a logic lock," Kaya murmured, stepping closer. "A biometric gate." As she spoke, The ground beneath them trembled. The black sand exploded outward. 3 shapes rose from the dunes. They were constructs, rough-hewn from the same black metal as the tower, but shaped like multi-limbed insects. Their eyes were burning coals of blue energy. "Contact!" Ronan shouted, shouldering his rifle. He fired. The pulse round struck the lead construct, blowing a chunk of its carapace away. But the machine didn't slow down. It screeched, a sound like grinding gears, and lunged. Kaya didn't fire. She dropped into a crouch, her hand slapping the interface on her thigh. "Maximum output," she whispered. Her brace flared with white light. She stomped her foot. A shockwave of gravity distortion rippled out from her boot. It wasn't just a stabilizer. It was a weaponized gravity well. The wave hit the sand, lifting a wall of black glass and debris into the air. "Ronan, duck!" Kaya shouted. Ronan dropped. Kaya swept her leg in a wide arc. The gravity pulse caught the floating debris and hurled it forward like a shotgun blast. The rocks slammed into the constructs with the force of a freight train, shattering their limbs and knocking them backward. One of the constructs, damaged but functional, skittered up the side of the ruin, trying to flank them. It moved with a chaotic, jerky rhythm. Ronan watched it. He lowered his rifle. He had seen this before. Not on a machine, but on a psychotic berserker beetle in the arena. "It has a pattern," Ronan said, tossing the rifle aside. He drew the dual vibroblades he had strapped to his back. "What are you doing?" Kaya yelled, preparing another gravity pulse. "It is resetting its gyro every 4th step," Ronan shouted, breaking into a run. He sprinted toward the wall. The construct leaped at him, mandibles clicking. Ronan slid on the black sand, going under the creature. As he passed beneath, he slashed upward. The vibroblades severed the exposed gyro stabilizer he had predicted would be vulnerable on the 4th beat. The construct collapsed, thrashing helplessly. Ronan didn't stop. He ran to the gate, where the glyphs were spinning wildly. "The gate is locked by a rhythm," Ronan yelled back at Kaya. "It is not a code, it is a heartbeat." He sheathed one blade and used the hilt of the other to hammer against the resonant plate of the door. Thump, 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 thump. He was mimicking the pulse of the glyphs. The door shuddered. The glyphs turned from blue to green. With a groan of ancient gears, the massive slab of metal split down the middle and slid open. Kaya stood amidst the wreckage of the first 2 constructs, staring at him. She had used raw power and technology. He had used observation and rhythm. "You solved a precursor logic gate by drumming on it?" Kaya asked, incredulous. "It wasn't logic," Ronan said, retrieving his rifle. "It was a tempo. Everything that fights has a rhythm, even a door." They moved into the spire. The interior was vast, lit by the same bioluminescent veins they had seen in the gardens. But here the light was cold and white. The ship's AI voice echoed in their earpieces. Combat encounter resolved. The AI chirped. Its voice was annoyingly cheerful. Biometric analysis indicates elevated heart rates and synchronized dopamine release. Probability of combat bonding ritual, 98%. "Would you like me to dim the lights for the mating phase?" Ronan choked on a breath. Kaya stopped dead in her tracks. "Ship," Kaya snapped, "if you do not delete that subroutine, I will manually eject your core into a sun." Query. "Is that a euphemism?" the AI asked innocently. Ronan let out a laugh. It was a rusty barking sound, unused for years, but genuine. He leaned against the wall, shaking his head. "I think the ship likes us." "Princess," he said, a grin cracking through his stoic mask. Kaya glared at him, her face flushing a deep crimson. "It is a malfunctioning algorithm. It is not funny." "It is a little funny," Ronan said. "Mating odds." I wonder what the payout on that bet would be in the arena. Kaya opened her mouth to reprimand him, to retreat into her cold shell, but she saw the light in his eyes. The shadows of the torture chamber were gone. He was teasing her, and for the first time in her life, she didn't hate it. Her glare faltered. The corner of her mouth twitched. "Let us just find the relic," she muttered, walking faster to hide her face. The path upward was treacherous. The stairs were missing in sections, requiring them to leap across gaps that dropped into infinite darkness. They reached a section where the walkway had crumbled away entirely, leaving a 10-foot gap. "I can make it," Kaya said. "The brace has jump assist." She backed up, revved the servos, and leaped. She cleared the gap easily, landing on the far ledge, but the stone she landed on was brittle. It crumbled under the heavy impact of her metal leg. "Kaya!" She slipped, sliding backward into the dark. Her hands scrabbled for purchase on the smooth metal. Ronan didn't hesitate. He leaped. He didn't have jump assist. He had muscle and desperation. He hit the ledge hard, the impact knocking the wind out of him. But his hand shot out and grabbed Kaya's wrist just as she lost her grip. He groaned, the strain on his arm immense. He dug his boots into a crack in the floor and pulled. He hauled her up, dragging her over the edge. They collapsed onto the safe ground, tangled together, breathing hard. Kaya scrambled to her knees, checking her brace. It was scratched but functional. She looked at Ronan. He was lying on his back, staring at the ceiling, chest heaving. He sat up. He reached out, his hands gripping her waist, checking her for injuries. It was an instinctive move, born of the adrenaline. "You are insane," Kaya whispered. "You could have fallen." "I caught you," Ronan said, his voice rough. His hands were still on her waist. The heavy armor of her uniform felt thin under his touch. They were close, so close she could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. The adrenaline from the near-death experience was morphing into something else. Something hot and electric. Kaya didn't pull away. She looked at his lips. The silence of the tomb stretched around them, heavy with unspoken things. "Don't," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't take what I didn't give." It was a plea, a final defense. She was a princess who had been taken from, used, and politicked her whole life. She could not bear to have this taken too. Ronan went still. His hands didn't move, but his grip tightened slightly, possessive but controlled. He looked at her, seeing the hunger she was trying to hide behind the fear. "Then give me something," he said. The words were raw, a challenge and an invitation. Kaya stared at him. The command broke her. She surged forward. She grabbed the collar of his armor and pulled him to her. Her mouth crashed against his. It wasn't gentle. It was angry. It was the kiss of two people who had been starving in the dark. It tasted of sweat and fear and sudden, blinding relief. Ronan made a low noise in his throat. He wrapped one hand around the back of her neck, tangling his fingers in her hair, and deepened the kiss. He kissed her like he fought, with total focus, with an intensity that threatened to consume them both. For a moment, there was no warlord, no council, no brace. There was just the heat of his skin and the desperate pressure of her mouth. Then, reality crashed back in. Kaya pulled back, gasping. Her eyes were wide, shocked. She scrambled backward, putting distance between them. She touched her lips, which felt swollen and bruised. She stood up, her brace clicking loudly in the silence. She turned her back to him, her shoulders rigid. We have a mission," she said. Her voice was back to the command tone, but it was brittle, cracking at the edges. "That was a mistake, adrenaline, nothing more." Ronan remained on the floor for a second, watching her back. He looked wrecked, as if he had just gone 12 rounds with a heavy worlder. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Understood. Princess, he said quietly. He stood up. He didn't try to touch her again. He respected the wall she had slammed down, even though he could see the mortar was wet. They walked the rest of the way in silence, the air between them vibrating with the energy of what had just happened, and what had been denied. The relic chamber was at the apex of the spire. In the center of the room, a crystalline lattice hovered, spinning slowly. It was beautiful and terrifying, singing a song that wasn't sound, but a vibration in the skull. It projected a hologram of a galaxy that looked different, older, the stars in slightly different positions. The throne key, Kaya whispered. She stepped forward. Secure the perimeter. She ordered Ronan, refusing to look at him. Ronan moved to the door, his back to her, watching the shadows. Kaya approached the crystal. She raised her left arm, the one with the brace. The interface on her thigh glowed. Biosignature detected. A voice boomed from the walls. It was a precursor voice, deep and resonant. Lineage confirmed. House Drath. Welcome, primary user. The crystal slowed. A beam of light connected to Kaya's brace. She gasped as data flooded her system. It was working. Secondary user detected, the voice announced. Kaya froze. Secondary user? Lineage confirmed. Terra Prime Treaty Branch. Welcome, Authenticator. A second beam of light shot out. It didn't hit Kaya. It hit Ronan. Ronan spun around as the light struck his chest. He staggered back, raising his hand to shield his eyes. The light curled around his arm, focusing on the palm of his right hand, exactly where an old scar from a knife fight marred the skin. What? Kaya shouted over the singing of the crystal. That is impossible. He is human. He has no royal blood. Authentication required for full activation. The voice intoned. Combine signatures. Before they could process the impossibility of the moment, the shadows at the door erupted. Flashbangs detonated, filling the room with blinding white light. Ambush! Ronan roared. He threw himself sideways as plasma fire raked the doorway. 6 mercenaries in heavy combat armor stormed the room. They weren't constructs. They were pros. The insignias on their shoulders were scraped off, but their gear was top-tier corporate. Secure the girl! Kill the meat! The leader shouted. Ronan didn't need orders. He moved. He slid across the floor, coming up under the guard of the first mercenary. His vibro blade punched through the armor weave at the knee. The man screamed. Kaya was moving too. She didn't have her weapons drawn, but she was connected to the crystal. She screamed, channeling her fear and confusion into the interface. The crystal pulsed. A wave of concussive force exploded outward from her, knocking 2 mercenaries off their feet. Ronan! To me! Kaya yelled. Ronan cut down another attacker and rolled backward, coming up spine to spine with Kaya. They stood in the center of the room, the crystal spinning wildly above them. They are trying to box us in, Ronan shouted, parrying a vibro sword strike. Kaya fired her sidearm, dropping a mercenary who was trying to flank them. We cannot hold them, we need the key. Take it, Ronan yelled. I can't. It needs you, Kaya shouted back. Put your hand on the interface. Ronan turned, grabbed the floating crystal with his scarred hand. Kaya grabbed the other side with her brace hand. The world turned white. Pain, absolute and pure, tore through them. It wasn't just data. It was a rewriting of their biology. The crystal shrieked, a high-pitched sound of structural failure. Unauthorized extraction, the voice warned. System instability. The crystal cracked. With a sound like a thunderclap, the relic exploded. It didn't destroy the room. It split. 2 distinct beams of light shot out. One slammed into Kaya's leg brace, fusing with the metal, turning the matte black into a glowing, translucent gold. The other slammed into Ronan's palm, searing into the flesh, turning the scar into a glowing geometric brand. The force of the split blew the remaining mercenaries backward. The ceiling began to collapse. "Run!" Kaya screamed. They didn't look back. They sprinted through the falling debris, dodging falling slabs of obsidian. They leaped the gaps, Kaya's upgraded brace propelling her with terrifying speed, Ronan keeping pace with sheer adrenaline. They hit the ship's ramp just as the spire groaned and began to implode. "Go! Go! Go!" Ronan slammed his hand on the launch override. The Nighthawk blasted off, engines screaming, escaping the gravity well just as the temple crumbled into the black sand. In the dim light of the cargo hold, silence returned. Kaya sat on a crate, her chest heaving. She looked down at her leg. The brace was humming with a new, alien energy. It felt lighter, part of her nervous system now. Ronan stood by the airlock, staring at his hand. The palm was glowing with a soft, blue light. The pattern matched the one on Kaya's brace. Kaya looked at him. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrifying realization. "My father," she whispered. Her voice was trembling with fury. Ronan looked up. He knew. Kaya said, "He didn't choose you to insult the council. He didn't choose you because you were strong." She stood up, walking toward him, her eyes searching his face as if seeing him for the first time. The relic required a human authenticator, a specific bloodline. Ronan looked at the glowing mark on his hand. He clenched his fist, extinguishing the light, but he could still feel the hum of it in his bones. He stared at Kaya. "Then what did he choose me for?" Ronan asked, his voice low and dangerous. Kaya didn't answer. She didn't have to. The truth was heavier than the gravity of the dead moon. He wasn't a random slave. He was a key, and Vile Drath had known it all along. The psionic storm did not hit the Nighthawk like a weather system. It hit like a fever dream. One moment, the ship was streaking away from the dead moon of Xylos, the engines humming a steady baritone of survival. The next, the stars outside the viewports dissolved into streaks of bleeding violet and bruised charcoal. The interior of the cockpit warped. The bulkheads seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with the rhythm of a sleeping giant. Kaya gripped the flight controls, her knuckles white. She tried to bank the ship, but the stick felt like it was made of rubber. "We are caught in the wake," she shouted, or she thought she shouted. When she opened her mouth, the words that came out were not High Drathian. They were rough, guttural, the dialect of the earth slums where Ronan had grown up. She understood them perfectly, but the feeling of them on her tongue was alien, tasting of ash and iron. Ronan, seated at the sensor station, spun around. He looked at her with wide eyes. "The geometry is collapsing," he said, but his voice was hers. It was the polished, melodic cadence of the Citadel aristocracy, refined over 1,000 years of rule. It sounded wrong coming from his scarred throat, a dissonance that made Kaya's stomach lurch. "Focus," Kaya commanded, fighting the nausea. "The storm is bending reality. Do not trust your eyes, trust the nav computer." She looked at the digital readout. The numbers were not numbers anymore. They were memories. Instead of altitude, the screen showed a flashing image of her first dance at court, spinning in a dress that felt too tight. Then it flickered to Ronan's memory, a bowl of cold gruel sitting on a wet stone floor. "We are drifting," Ronan yelled, his voice snapping back to his own rough baritone as the reality wave passed. "There is a gravity well dead ahead. It is massive. It is not a planet," Kaya said, squinting through the distortion. "It looks like a graveyard." The ship shuddered violently, metal screaming as it was yanked out of the slipstream. Below them, looming in the psychedelic haze of the storm, was a monstrosity. It was a city, but not one built by design. It was a tumor of fused metal, thousands of derelict starships, broken stations, and hollowed-out asteroids welded together into a chaotic, drifting sphere. It was the drift, the place where lost things went to rot. "Brace for impact," Kaya screamed. She fired the retro thrusters. The ship groaned, fighting the magnetic pull of the massive wreck city. Kaya fought the controls, her upgraded leg brace locking into the pilot's interface, sending micro-adjustments faster than her hands could move. They hit the atmosphere, a thin, toxic soup of leaking coolant and recycled air. The Nighthawk clipped a jagged spire of rusted iron, spun 360 degrees and slammed into a landing bay that looked like the open mouth of a mechanical shark. The impact threw them against their restraints. Sparks showered the cockpit. Then, silence. Kaya unbuckled first. Her breathing was ragged. She checked her limbs. Everything was attached. "Status?" she rasped. Ronan was already moving, checking the seals. "Hull integrity is at 60%. We are grounded, Princess, and we have company." He pointed to the viewport. Through the smoke, figures were emerging from the shadows of the landing bay. They were a motley collection of species, four-armed scavengers, cybernetic humans, and tall, spindly aliens wrapped in rags. They carried weapons that looked cobbled together from scrap, but the barrels were dark and dangerous. Kaya smoothed her uniform. She checked the hidden daggers in her sleeves. "Let me handle this," she said, her voice icy. "These are scavengers. They will respect authority." She lowered the ramp. The air that rushed in smelled of ozone, burning plastic, and old desperation. Kaya walked down the ramp, her chin lifted, her brace humming with a menacing low-frequency throb. Ronan followed a step behind, his hand resting on the pulse rifle slung across his chest. "I am Princess Kaya Drath of the High Council," Kaya announced, her voice projecting over the hum of ventilation fans. "This vessel is royal property. We require repairs and refueling. You will be compensated." The crowd of scavengers stared at her. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, a short, squat alien with a mechanical eye burst out laughing. "Princess?" the creature wheezed, spitting a glob of blue fluid onto the deck. "You hear that, lads? We got royalty in the junk heap." The crowd erupted in jeers. "Your titles don't buy air here." Sweetling, a tall human woman with a cybernetic jaw, sneered. "And that pretty ship? It belongs to the drift now. Strip it." The crowd surged forward. Kaya stiffened, her hand going to her weapon. She had miscalculated. Authority required a framework of law, and there was no law here. "Wait." Ronan stepped in front of her. He didn't draw his weapon. He didn't shout. He simply held up his hands, palms open. "We are not royalty today," Ronan said. His voice was flat, calm, and carried the undeniable weight of the streets. "We are runners, just like you." The crowd hesitated. They recognized the tone. It was the tone of someone who had slept with a knife under their pillow. "We have credits," Ronan continued. "Hard currency, not council promises. And we have a ship that is half dead. You help us fix it. We pay you double the scrap value. You try to take it, and I blow the reactor core and take this whole landing bay with us." He stared at the woman with the metal jaw. "I know a fusion rig when I see one." Ronan lied smoothly. "You don't want a thermal detonation this close to your atmospheric scrubbers. Bad for business." The woman narrowed her eyes. She looked at Ronan, then at the ship, then back at Ronan. She saw the scar on his cheek. She saw the way he stood, balanced, ready to kill or deal, but preferring the deal. 2,000 credits for the intake manifold, she said, crossing her arms. "Up front, done," Ronan said. The tension broke. The scavengers lowered their weapons and began to disperse. suddenly uninterested in violence now that profit was on the table. Kaya stood frozen, her hand still on her dagger. She looked at Ronan. He was already haggling with a mechanic over fuel purity. She felt a sharp spike of annoyance. She was the diplomat. She was the strategist. And yet, here in the gutter, her title was a liability and his rough edges were currency. But beneath the annoyance, there was something else. Intrigue. He navigated this chaos as easily as she navigated a ballroom. Ronan turned back to her, catching her expression. "Don't look at me like that," he muttered. "Like what? Like you are deciding whether to thank me or execute me for insubordination." Kaya let out a short breath. "Let us go with thank you. For now." They found lodging in a sector of the wrecked city known as the Rust Belt. It was a labyrinth of corridors made from fused hull plates, lit by flickering neon tubes. The inn was a converted cargo container, but it had a locking door and a water recycler that mostly worked. They needed information. The drift was a hub for smugglers, and smugglers knew everything. While Ronan secured the room, Kaya went to find a medic. Her brace had taken damage during the escape from the temple. The fusion with the relic had warped the metal, and it was grinding against her bone. She found a clinic tucked behind a noodle stall. The doctor was a frantic, multi-limbed insectoid named Fixer. Fixer examined the brace, his mandibles clicking with excitement. "Precursor tech," he chirped. "Rare, very rare. But the integration is sloppy. It is eating your nerve endings. You are in pain. Yes?" "I can manage," Kaya said tightly. "Just patch the stabilizers." "I can do better," Fixer said. He pulled up a holographic schematic. "I have illegal tech. Grav fins from a stealth frigate. Silent step servos. I can integrate them. Make you faster, quieter. But I have to cut deep." Kaya hesitated. She looked at the schematic. It was powerful tech, but it was ugly. It would make the brace bulkier, more machine-like. It would be a permanent admission that she was not whole. "I do not need charity upgrades," she said, pulling her leg back. "I just want it to work." She turned to leave. Ronan was standing in the doorway. He had been watching. He stepped into the cramped room. "What if it is not pity?" he asked quietly. Kaya looked at him. "What? What if it is not a crutch?" Ronan asked. "What if it is power?" He gestured to the brace. "You are worried about looking broken," Ronan said. "But out here, nobody cares if you are broken. They only care if you are dangerous. That tech? It makes you dangerous." Kaya looked at the schematic again. She thought of the drone in the training hall. She thought of the mercenaries in the temple. She thought of her father, alone in the citadel, waiting for a savior. She looked at Fixer. "Do it," she commanded, "but on my terms." She pointed to the diagram. "I want the grav fins. I want the silent step. But I also want a retractable blade housing here, along the tibia. And I want the emitter output doubled." Fixer chittered nervously. "That is aggressive." "I am done being defensive," Kaya said. The surgery took 3 hours. When it was done, Kaya stood up. The new brace was matte charcoal, sleek and predatory. She took a step. There was no sound, no whine of servos, no heavy thud. She moved like a ghost. She triggered the mechanism. A 6-inch energy blade snapped out from the shin guard with a lethal hiss. Kaya smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. Back in the safe room, the atmosphere was heavy. Ronan had returned from the local info broker with news. And it was bad. He sat on the edge of the narrow bunk, staring at a data pad. Kaya paced the small room, her new silent steps making her seem like she was teleporting from corner to corner. "Tell me again," she said. It is your uncle, Ronan said, Vile's brother, Lord Kalen. Kaya stopped. Kalen. The one man my father trusted with the perimeter fleets. He made a deal with the High Council, Ronan explained. He removes Vile. He kills you. In exchange, he gets the throne. But as a puppet, the Council dictates policy. And the first policy is the Restabilization Act. What is that? Ronan looked up. His eyes were dark. It is a nice name for slavery. They want to recollar every human in the sector. They claim our freedom is what caused the instability. They are going to use us as biological stabilizers. Kaya felt a cold pit open in her stomach. It wasn't just a coup. It was a regression, a dismantling of everything her father had quietly tried to build. They want to erase us, she whispered. They sat in silence for a long time. The weight of the galaxy seemed to press in on the thin metal walls of the container. Kaya sat down next to him. She was close enough to smell the soap he had used to wash off the grime of the crash. She rolled up the leg of her trousers, exposing the skin above the brace. The surgery scars were fresh, angry red lines where the metal interface plunged into her muscle. It is ugly, isn't it? She said softly. Ronan looked at the scars. He didn't look away. No, he said, it is the cost of standing. He reached up and unbuttoned the collar of his tunic. He pulled the fabric aside, revealing the skin at the base of his neck and shoulder. It was a map of violence, brands, burn marks, the white knotted tissue of whip scars that had never healed right. This is ugly, Ronan said. This is what power does when it doesn't have to answer to anyone. Kaya reached out. Her fingers hovered over the brand on his shoulder. The sigil of the slave pits. Does it hurt? She asked. Only when I remember, Ronan said. Kaya's hand touched the scar. Her fingers were cool. Ronan shivered, but he didn't pull away. He leaned into her touch, just slightly. The air in the room changed. The political threat faded, replaced by a sudden, overwhelming awareness of the body next to them. Kaya looked at his face. He was looking at her mouth. The door was locked. The world was outside, in here. They were just two people with too many scars. I am tired of being a symbol, Kaya whispered. The broken princess, the warlord's daughter, the bait. She shifted, turning her body toward him. Her knee bumped his thigh. I keep being used, she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and a sudden, sharp desire. By the council, by my father, by history. She looked him in the eyes, her gaze fierce. I won't be used by you. Ronan. Ronan looked at her. He saw the fire in her. He saw the terrifying vulnerability she was offering him. He slowly pulled his hand back, resting it on the mattress, palm open. He created space. He gave her the entire room. Then command me, he said, his voice rough with restraint. Or tell me to leave. I will walk out that door right now if you say the word. Kaya looked at the open door of his posture. He was giving her all the power. He was the strongest man she had ever met, and he was surrendering to her completely. She didn't tell him to leave. She moved. She crossed the small space between them, straddling his lap. Her hands framed his face, her thumbs tracing the line of his jaw. Stay, she commanded. She kissed him. This wasn't the desperate, adrenaline-fueled collision in the temple. This was deliberate. It was hungry. It was a claiming. Ronan's hands came up to grip her waist, holding her steady. He groaned into her mouth, a sound of pure want that vibrated through her chest. Kaya deepened the kiss, her fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer until there was no air left between them. They fell back onto the narrow bunk. The pride that usually stood between them like a wall crumbled into dust. Kaya pressed against him, feeling the hard lines of his body. She felt safe, not because he was a shield, but because he was a harbor. Ronan's hand moved up her side, his thumb grazing the underside of her breast. Kaya gasped, arching into the touch. Then she stopped. She pulled back just an inch, her breathing ragged. Her forehead rested against his. Ronan froze instantly. His hands went still. "Too much?" he rasped. Kaya shook her head. "No, not too much, but—" She took a breath, trying to steady her racing heart. "If we do this, if we cross this line, there is no going back to just being allies, and I cannot lose my shield right now. I cannot lose my head." Ronan looked up at her. His eyes were blown wide, dark with desire but clear. "We don't cross," he whispered. "Not until you are ready to burn the bridge." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, reverent. It was a restraint that spoke louder than any grand gesture. He wanted her. She could feel the evidence of it against her hip, but he respected her boundaries more than his own hunger. Kaya kissed him one last time, soft and lingering. "Thank you," she whispered. She rolled off him, lying beside him in the dark, their hands clasped between them. They didn't speak. They just breathed, anchoring each other in the chaos. 2 hours later, the door blew open. There was no warning. 1 second they were resting. The next, a concussion grenade rolled into the room. Flash. Bang! Kaya's ears rang. She scrambled for her weapon, but a boot slammed into her wrist, pinning it to the floor. Ronan roared, launching himself from the bed, but 3 stun batons hit him simultaneously. The electricity arced through him, dropping him to his knees through the ringing in her ears. Kaya heard a familiar voice. "Sorry, Princess," the smuggler woman with the cybernetic jaw said. "But 10,000 credits is a lot of money." Behind the smuggler, a figure stepped into the room. He wore the sleek black armor of the High Council's elite enforcers. He held a staff of office topped with a holographic projector. The emissary. He looked down at Kaya and Ronan with a sneer of absolute contempt. "Lord Kalen sends his regards," the emissary said. "Get up," he ordered. Guards dragged them out of the container and into the main atrium of the wrecked city. A crowd had gathered. The emissary wanted an audience. He activated the projector. A massive image of Kaya and Ronan appeared above them. "Behold," the emissary boomed, "the fallen daughter." He walked around them, pacing like a shark. "The council has declared Princess Kaya unfit to rule," he announced. "She has been corrupted by her association with this beast. She has abandoned her station. She has engaged in deviant relations with a slave." Kaya struggled against the magnetic cuffs binding her wrists. "You are lying. It is a coup." "Who will believe you?" the emissary asked softly, leaning down. "You are in a garbage dump, wearing criminal tech, holding hands with a murderer." He straightened up. "We will not kill you here. That would be too quick. We will take you back to Karzul. You will be put on trial. Ronan will be executed as a rapist who corrupted the princess. And you, Kaya, you will be declared insane and locked away in a sanitarium until you rot." Ronan looked at Kaya. He saw the terror in her eyes. Not for herself, but for the shame they were trying to paint over her. He looked at the magnetic cuffs. He looked at the bulkhead of the ship they were standing next to. "Hey!" Ronan shouted. The emissary turned. "Do you have last words?" "Slave?" "Yeah." Ronan grinned. His teeth were bloody. "You forgot to check my upgrades." Ronan didn't pull at the cuffs. He twisted his body and slammed his shoulder into the structural support beam of the walkway. He didn't just hit it. He exerted a force that should have been impossible for a human. The muscles in his neck corded like steel cables. The bond mark on his palm flared with a blinding white light, reacting to his stress. The beam snapped. The entire walkway collapsed. Chaos erupted. The guards lost their footing as the floor tilted 45 degrees. "A run!" Ronan roared. Kaya didn't hesitate. She activated her new brace. Grav fins engaged. She didn't run down the walkway. She ran on the wall. She sprinted perpendicular to the ground, her boots locking onto the metal hull. She blurred past the guards, her blade snapping out to sever the hydraulic line of the emissary's platform. The platform crashed down. Ronan ripped his cuffs apart, the metal shearing under the enhanced strength the relic had awakened in him, and grabbed a stunned guard, throwing him into two others. Kaya dropped from the wall, landing beside him. "The airlock," she pointed. They sprinted through the shifting guts of the city. The entire station was groaning as the structural damage spread. They reached the airlock to the Nighthawk. Ronan spun the wheel, sealing it behind them just as plasma fire scarred the door. They launched as the ship tore away from the wrecked city. Kaya slumped into the pilot's seat. She looked at Ronan. "You broke steel," she said, breathless, barehanded. Ronan looked at his hand. The mark was glowing faintly. "And you ran on a wall," he countered. Kaya looked at the datapad they had stolen from the emissary during the scuffle. She accessed the files. Her eyes went wide. "Ronan, look at this." She projected the file. It was a genealogical tree. It showed the Drath royal line. And next to it, a human line. A line that dated back 300 years to the First Contact War. The Treaty of Terra Prime. Kaya read, "To ensure peace, the alien warlords and the human leaders exchanged genetic keys, a failsafe. The ultimate weapons of both species could only be activated by a pair, one alien, one human." She looked at Ronan. "You are not just a slave," she whispered. "You are a descendant of the human high command. Your DNA is the other half of the key." Ronan stared at the screen. He had been born in a gutter. He had eaten rats to survive, and yet his blood carried the codes of kings. "My father." Kaya realized, her voice trembling. He knew. The humiliation, the public bonding, it wasn't to punish me. It was the only way to get the key to work. He couldn't tell the council, or they would have killed you instantly. He had to hide you in plain sight. "He made me a slave to save the galaxy," Ronan said bitterly. "He made you a partner," Kaya corrected. A proximity alarm blared. "Incoming transmission." The ship's AI chirped. "Encryption level, vermilion." Kaya opened the channel. The image was static-filled. It was Vile. He was sitting on the throne, but he was slumped to one side. His skin was gray. Blood trickled from his mouth. "Kaya," he rasped. "Kalen. Poison. The Citadel is fallen. The fleet is under their control." "Father," Kaya screamed. "Do not come back," Vael wheezed. "They are waiting. Stay hidden. Keep the key safe. If they get it, the darkness wins." The transmission cut to static. Kaya stared at the blank screen. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't make a sound. Ronan stood up. He walked over to her. He placed his hand on her shoulder. "He is gone," Kaya whispered. "Or he will be soon." She looked up at him. Her face was pale, terrifyingly resolved. "If we go back," she said, her voice steady and terrified, "we might die. It is a trap. They have the fleet. They have the army. We are two people in a scout ship." Ronan looked at the star map. He looked at the glowing mark on his hand. He looked at the woman who had kissed him in the dark and refused to break him. "If we don't go back," Ronan said, "you lose everything. Your home, your father, your name." Kaya stood up. She wiped the tears from her face. She triggered her blade, the sound sharp and final. "No," she said. "If we don't, everyone does." She punched the coordinates for Karzul into the nav computer. Take us home. Ronan, we have a war to end. The biomech scout ship, the Nighthawk, did not just fly. It bled speed into the void. As they tore through the subspace corridor back toward Karzul, the living hull of the vessel began to bruise. Dark, purplish welts appeared on the organic bulkheads, the ship's neural architecture screaming under the strain of the psionic wake they dragged behind them. Kaya sat in the pilot's cradle, her hands fused to the gel interface. She could feel the ship's pain as if it were her own nerve endings firing. Hold together, she whispered, sweat beading on her forehead. Just a little longer. Ronan stood behind her, watching the telemetry. The bond mark on his palm throbbed in sync with the engine's heartbeat. He wasn't piloting, but he was pouring his own stamina into the connection, a silent battery feeding the ship's desperate sprint. They burst out of slipspace above Karzul. The fortress world looked the same from orbit, a rusted iron sphere wrapped in orbital defense rings. But as they descended, the details were wrong. The landing codes had been changed. Kaya had to use an old smuggler's frequency to bypass the automated traffic controllers. As they swept over the citadel, the banners flying from the spires were no longer the crimson and gold of House Drath. They were blue and silver. The colors of the Council Peacekeeping Initiative. They have occupied the city, Kaya said, her voice tight. They landed on a private pad near the lower districts, avoiding the main spaceport. As the ramp hissed open, the air of Karzul hit them, hot, industrial, and thick with the scent of ozone and oppression. The guard rotations were wrong. Council soldiers in blue armor stood at checkpoints where House Drath loyalists should have been. The atmosphere was suffocating, a heavy blanket of silence over a city that usually roared with life. Kaya stepped onto the tarmac. Her new brace, the charcoal black upgrade from the wrecked city, made no sound. She moved like a shadow, lethal and precise. Ronan walked beside her, his pulse rifle slung low, his eyes scanning the rooftops. We walk into the front door, Kaya said. Are you sure that is wise? Ronan asked. We are walking into a mouth. If we sneak in, we look like criminals. Kaya replied, adjusting her cuffs. If we walk in, we look like rulers. Perception is the first battlefield. They marched to the Great Hall. The guards at the massive gates hesitated. They saw the princess, whom the broadcasts claimed was insane, looking terrifyingly composed. They saw the human beside her, not in chains, but walking with the stride of a predator. Stand aside, Kaya ordered. The guards looked at each other. They didn't lower their weapons, but they didn't fire. They opened the gates. The court was in session. It was a sea of opulent robes and hushed whispers. When Kaya and Ronan entered, the silence that fell was absolute. Hundreds of heads turned. Nobles stared at Kaya's leg. They expected the clunky, whirring medical device they knew. Instead, they saw sleek, alien tech that looked less like a disability and more like a weapon system. Then they looked at Ronan. Disgust rippled through the room, but beneath the sneers, there was fear. He wasn't wearing a collar. He was wearing the armor of a free man, and his eyes held a challenge that made high lords look at their shoes. Lord Kalen sat on the steps of the Warlord's throne, not quite daring to sit on the seat itself yet. He was a thinner, sharper version of Vile, his face masked in false concern. Kaya, Kalen said, standing up, we feared the worst. We were told you had been compromised. I am alive, Uncle, Kaya said, her voice projecting to the back of the hall. And I am here to see my father. The Warlord is indisposed, Kalen said smoothly. A sudden illness. The Council has placed him under quarantine for his own health. We are managing the transition of power to ensure stability. It is a coup, Kaya stated flatly. Gasps echoed through the chamber. It is a mercy, Kalen corrected, his smile not reaching his eyes. And as for your companion, the council has reviewed the bond. It is declared void, a product of your father's delirium. It is barbaric to shackle a noble of the blood to a slave. I am not a slave, Ronan said. The voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a whip crack. Kalen sneered. You are livestock with a vocabulary. Ronan took a step forward. He looked at Kalen, then at the council members flanking him. He locked eyes with a particularly pompous official wearing a towering hat made of iridescent shells. Greetings, Grand High Chamber Pot, Ronan said, bowing with exaggerated mocking grace. The room froze. The official turned purple. I am the Grand High Chamberlain, the official sputtered. Ronan shrugged. Chamberlain, Chamber Pot. You both deal with the same substance, do you not? A few stifled snorts of laughter erupted from the back of the room, soldiers mostly, who hated the bureaucrats. Insolence, Kalen roared. Seize him. Kaya stepped in front of Ronan. He speaks with human honesty, she said, her voice razor-sharp. Perhaps if you spent less time polishing your titles and more time governing, you would know the difference between a servant and a tool. And you would know that under the old laws, a bond formed by the Warlord cannot be broken by a committee. She turned to the guards approaching them. My father is in the East Wing. I am going to him. Anyone who stands in my way is declaring treason against the House of Drath. She began to walk. Ronan fell in step. Stop her, Kalen screamed. A squad of elite council guards blocked the archway leading to the royal quarters. They raised their weapons. We have legal orders. Princess, the captain said, his voice shaking slightly. Do not force us to fire. Kaya didn't stop. She reached down to her thigh. She didn't draw a weapon. She placed her hand on the interface of her brace. The golden light of the throne key flared beneath the matte black metal. She channeled the command codes she had absorbed from the relic. Override, she whispered. The air in the hall shrieked. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into twilight. The energy shields on the guards' weapons sparked and shorted out, the power cells draining instantly. The massive blast doors behind the guards groaned and slammed open, triggered by a security override that outranked every general in the room. The guards dropped their useless weapons, backing away in terror. Kaya stood illuminated by the glow of her leg, a figure of technological vengeance. The path is open, she said. The nobles cowered. They had heard rumors of the relic, but seeing the power to command the Citadel's systems with a touch was different. It was the power of the ancients. Kalen saw his control slipping. He needed to regain the narrative. He couldn't kill her now. She looked too powerful. He had to humiliate her. He had to break the legend. Hold! Kalen shouted. He stepped down from the dais. You wield tricks. Kaya. Stolen tech. But the law is clear. If you claim this human is your equal, then he must prove he is worthy of the Drath bloodline. He pointed a shaking finger at Ronan. I invoke the trial of strength. If the bond is legitimate, fate will protect him. If it is an abomination, he will die. Kaya froze. The trial of strength was a death sentence. It was the ancient way of settling succession disputes. He is not on trial, Kaya said. He is if you want him to live, Kalen smiled. Refuse, and my guards will tear him apart right here, weapons or no weapons. Accept. And he faces the champion. Kaya looked at Ronan. Ronan looked at Kalen. I accept, Ronan said. Ronan! Kaya hissed. I accept, Ronan repeated. Louder! The arena was packed within the hour. News had spread like wildfire. The crippled princess and the slave consort, the coup, the trial. 80,000 citizens packed the stands of the obsidian arena. But this time, the mood was different. They weren't betting on blood. They were holding their breath. Kaya sat in the royal box, but not on the throne. She sat on a simple chair, surrounded by Kaelin's guards. She was a prisoner in all but name. Her hands gripped the armrests so tightly the metal warped. Below, the sand was black and hot. The gates opened. Ronan walked out. He wasn't wearing the loincloth of a slave. He was wearing the armor he had stolen from the mercenaries, scuffed, practical, gray plates over black fatigues. He carried a simple Durasteel staff. The crowd didn't boo. They didn't cheer. They watched. The opposite gate groaned open. The ground shook. The champion emerged. It was not a draconian. It was a cyber Hulk, a massive genetic experiment, 12 feet of muscle grafted onto a robotic chassis. It had a buzzsaw for a hand and eyes that glowed with a mindless chemical rage. Kaya stopped breathing. This wasn't a duel. It was an execution. The announcer's voice boomed, "Prove the bond, or let blood wash it away." Down in the prep tunnel, moments before, Kaya had grabbed Ronan. The memory of it burned in her mind as she watched him stand alone on the sand. She had shoved the guards aside and gripped his wrist, her fingers digging into the flesh around the glowing bond mark. "Don't you dare leave me with them," she had whispered, her voice cracking. "Do not die to prove a point." Ronan had stopped. He had leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. The world had narrowed to the space of a single breath. "Then look at me," he had whispered back. "Keep looking. I will come back to your eyes, now on the sand." Ronan looked up. He found her face in the crowd. He nodded once. The cyber Hulk roared and charged. It was faster than anything that size had a right to be. The buzzsaw arm screamed, slashing through the air where Ronan's head had been a fraction of a second before. Ronan moved. He didn't fight like a gladiator. He fought like a partner. He moved with the rhythm he had learned in the temple, the silent step he had learned in the wrecked city. He ducked under the saw, slamming his staff into the hydraulic piston of the Hulk's knee. Metal crunched. The Hulk stumbled, swinging a massive fist. Ronan took the hit on his shoulder plate. The force sent him skidding across the sand, pain exploding in his side, but he kept his feet. He was stronger now. The relic's energy in his blood gave him a density, a resilience that was beyond human. He didn't attack the body. He attacked the mechanics. He saw the pattern. Step, whir, slash, step, whir, slash. The Hulk lunged. Ronan dropped his staff. He stepped inside the guard, risking instant death. He grabbed the Hulk's mechanical arm with his glowing hand. The bond mark flared. The relic energy surged. Ronan didn't overpower the machine. He commanded it. "Override!" Ronan roared. The energy arc jumped from his hand into the cybernetics of the beast. The Hulk seized up. Sparks showered the arena. The buzzsaw sputtered and died. The red light in the creature's eyes flickered and went out. The massive beast toppled forward, face-planting into the black sand with a thunderous crash. Ronan stood over it, chest heaving. He picked up the buzzsaw arm, ripping it free from the chassis with a screech of tearing metal. He raised the weapon. "Finish it!" Kaelin screamed from the box. "Kill the abomination!" The crowd screamed for blood. It was the law of the arena. The victor eats the loser. Ronan looked at the fallen monster. It was helpless, a slave to its own programming, just as he had been a slave to the collar. He looked up at the royal box. He looked at Kaelin. Then he looked at Kaya. Ronan threw the weapon down. "No!" he shouted. His voice echoed through the amplification field. "I am not your butcher. I am not your entertainment." He turned his back on the fallen enemy and walked toward the center of the arena, raising his glowing hand to the crowd. I am Ronan Vale, shield consort to Princess Kaya Drath, and I choose mercy. The silence was deafening. Then, a single slow clap started from the slave pens, then another. Then the soldiers began to cheer, then the citizens. It wasn't the blood roar of the mob. It was something terrifyingly new. It was hope. Kalen stood frozen. He had lost. He had tried to show a beast, and instead, he had shown a king. Kaya didn't wait. She vaulted over the railing of the box. Her brace absorbed the 20-foot drop with a silent thud. She marched onto the sand, her head held high. The guards didn't stop her. They were too busy watching the crowd, afraid that the riot was about to turn on them. Kaya reached Ronan. She didn't speak. She grabbed his arm and dragged him toward the exit tunnel, her grip like iron. They vanished into the shadows of the stadium bowels. Kaya didn't stop until they reached a service corridor deep under the arena. It was dark, smelling of damp stone and coolant. She shoved him against the wall. It wasn't gentle. It was violent with relief. Her hands grabbed the front of his armor, shaking him. "You idiot," she hissed, tears streaming down her face. "You reckless, arrogant, impossible human." Ronan didn't fight her. He let her shake him. He was breathing hard, the adrenaline crash hitting him. "I won," he panted. "You could have died," Kaya shouted. "I told you," Ronan said, his voice dropping. "I would come back to your eyes." Kaya stared at him. The anger broke, leaving only the raw, gaping need she had been holding back for weeks. She kissed him. It was a collision. She kissed him like she was reclaiming her life, like she was breathing air after drowning. Her hands fisted in his hair, pulling him down to her. Ronan responded instantly. His arms went around her, lifting her slightly, pressing her against the cold stone. He held her with careful strength, his glowing hand resting on the small of her back, the heat of it seeping through her clothes. There were no boundaries now. No negotiations. Kaya broke the kiss, gasping, her forehead resting against his neck. She was trembling. "I chose you back," she whispered. The words were quiet, but in the echo of the corridor they sounded like a shout. Ronan went still. "What?" he asked hoarsely. "My father chose you," Kaya said, looking up at him, her eyes fierce and wet. "The relic chose you, fate chose you, but I—" She touched his face, her thumb tracing the cut on his cheek. "I chose you back, not as a shield, not as a key, as mine." Ronan closed his eyes. He leaned his forehead against hers. For a moment, the war didn't exist. The coup didn't exist. There was only the woman who had just given him the only title that mattered. Then, the klaxons began to scream. Red emergency lights began to strobe in the corridor. A mechanical voice, cold and automated, began to broadcast over the city-wide speakers. "Attention! Attention! High treason declared!" Kaya stiffened. Ronan pulled back, his hand going to the knife at his belt. Princess Kaya Drath and the human conspirator Ronan Vale are declared enemies of the state. They have assassinated the Warlord. They are to be terminated on sight. Kaya looked at Ronan. The blood drained from her face. "Assassinated," she whispered. "But Vael is—" She realized it then. The illness, the quarantine. Kalen hadn't just isolated Vael. He had timed it. "He waited until we were public enemies," Ronan said grimly. "Then he killed him. And he pinned it on us." The sound of heavy boots echoed down the corridor. Council death squads. Kaya's face hardened. The grief tried to crush her, but she shoved it down into the furnace of her rage. She triggered her leg blade. It hissed to life, casting a blue glow over her tear-streaked face. "They want a traitor," she said, her voice turning to ice. "I will show them a warlord. Ronan drew his blade. He stood shoulder to shoulder with her. Which way? Kaya. Up, Kaya said. To the citadel. If my father is dead, the throne is empty, and I will burn this city to the ground before I let a murderer sit on it. They began to run, racing toward the fire. The citadel was no longer a palace. It was a dying organism fighting off an infection. Emergency lighting bathed the diamond glass corridors in a rhythmic, pulsing crimson, turning the pristine white marble into the color of fresh arterial blood. The air was thick with the acrid stench of ionized ozone and melting slag. Above the scream of the alarms, a new sound dominated the soundscape, the mechanical chittering of thousands of hunter-killer drones. They swarmed through the vaulted ceilings like black insects, their optical sensors sweeping the hallways in grid patterns. They were council tech, efficient and soulless, hunting for anything that did not broadcast a loyalty code to House Kalen. Princess Kaya Drath slid behind a pillar of obsidian, her chest heaving. She was not the terrified girl who had watched the arena from behind glass. She was a conductor of war. Her upgraded brace hummed against her skin, the golden light of the throne key interface pulsating through the matte charcoal plating. She didn't look at the chaos with fear. She looked at it as a schematic. Sector 7 is compromised, Kaya said, her voice calm amidst the noise. She tapped the interface on her thigh. Reroute auxiliary power to the containment shields in the east wing. Isolate the drone swarm in the atrium. A massive blast door slammed shut 50 yards away, cutting off the screeching approach of a dozen drones. The sound of them impacting the heavy metal was like hail on a tin roof. Kaya turned to the soldier beside her. It was Captain Torian, the commander of her father's personal guard, who had defected the moment Kaya had walked through the gates. Hold this junction. Captain, Kaya ordered. Do not let them flank us. Yes, Princess, Torian shouted over the roar of a plasma discharge. Kaya touched her earpiece. Ronan, status. The connection crackled, interference from the drone jammers heavy in the air. We are in the guts, Ronan's voice came back, distorted but steady. The maintenance tunnels are full of filth, but they are clear of drones. I have 300 with me. Are they ready? Kaya asked. They are not soldiers. Kaya, Ronan answered. They are kitchen staff, cleaners, slaves from the lower levels. They are terrified. Then give them a reason not to be, Kaya commanded. Deep beneath the polished floors of the citadel, in the steaming claustrophobic maze of the maintenance shafts. Ronan Vale stopped. He looked back at the crowd following him. They were a ragged army, men and women in gray tunics, some still wearing the raw red marks of collars that had been hastily cut off with industrial shears. They held improvised weapons, lengths of pipe, laser cutters from the repair bays, and heavy wrenches. They looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. They knew him as the gladiator, the beast, the man who had survived the arena, but they didn't know if he could survive a war against the High Council. Ronan climbed onto a crate of coolant canisters. He let the blue light of the bond mark on his palm illuminate his face. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The silence in the tunnel was absolute. Up there, Ronan said, pointing to the ceiling. They call you equipment. They say you are necessary for the stability of the realm. They say your lives are the mortar that holds their walls together. He paused, looking at a young man gripping a shovel like a spear. They are right, Ronan said. You are the mortar, but when the mortar moves, the wall falls. A ripple of movement went through the crowd. Backs straightened, grips tightened. They have drones. They have armor. They have laws written in ink that says you are nothing. Ronan continued, his voice rising, resonating off the damp metal walls. But we have something they forgot to account for. He raised his glowing hand, making a fist. We have the keys to the doors they locked us behind. He jumped down, landing with a heavy thud. Follow me, he growled, and take back your names. Ronan kicked open the maintenance hatch leading to the sub-level armory. The door flew off its hinges, warped by his enhanced strength. The mob surged forward, their fear transmuting into a cold, hard resolve. Kaya moved through the upper levels, a phantom in the red light. Her silent step upgrades allowed her to sprint without a sound, flanking a squad of council troopers who were pinning down her loyalists. She triggered her leg blade. It snapped out, a beam of coherent energy. She didn't kill them. She moved too fast for them to track, severing the power cables of their rifles and shattering the optics of their helmets with precise, calculated kicks. The troopers fell back, blinded and disarmed, retreating into the smoke. She reached the blast doors of the Warlord's private sanctum. The control panel was fried, sparking uselessly. Kaya placed her hand on the door. The throne key interface flared. Open, she whispered. The ancient metal groaned, recognizing the command of the bloodline, and slid aside. The room inside was dark, lit only by the medical monitors beeping steadily in the corner. The air smelled of antiseptic and sickness. Kaya walked to the bed. Vile Drath lay there. The warlord of Karzul, the terror of the sector, looked small. His skin was the color of ash. Tubes ran from his arms to a dialysis machine that was filtering the poison from his blood. He opened his eyes as she approached. They were sunken, but the fire in them was not out. Kaya, he rasped. Kaya stood over him. She felt a surge of grief so strong it nearly buckled her knees. But she held herself rigid. You are alive, she said. The broadcast said you were dead. A strategy. Vael wheezed. Kalen is impatient. He declared me dead to speed up the succession. He did not expect the poison to work so slowly. Kaya looked at the machines keeping him alive. Why? She asked. Not why did Kalen do it. Why did you do it? Why did you give me to him? She gestured to the door, to where Ronan was fighting. Vael tried to sit up, but failed. He slumped back, his breath rattling in his chest. Because I could not trust a marriage, Vael whispered. Any noble I gave you to would have been a snake. They would have used you to get to me, or killed you to clear the path for themselves. He looked at her brace. I needed a shield that the council could not buy, Vael said. I needed a man who had no loyalty to this system, a man who knew what it was to be hunted. So you humiliated me? Kaya asked, her voice trembling. You broke me in front of the entire galaxy to save me? I weaponized your pain, Vael admitted. It was cruel. It was ruthless. But look at you now. He gestured weakly to her. She was standing in combat armor, glowing with precursor power, commanding an army. You are not a victim. Kaya, Vael said softly. You are a warlord. I made you a weapon because I could not make you safe. Kaya looked at her father. She saw the logic. It was the cold, hard logic of a man who had spent 40 years at war. He had loved her enough to destroy her reputation to save her life. She reached out and took his hand. It was cold. Love doesn't excuse harm. Father, she said, her voice steady. You hurt me. You used me. And I will carry that scar longer than I will carry this brace. Vael closed his eyes, accepting the judgment. But, Kaya continued, squeezing his hand, it can still be real. I know you love me, and I know you chose him because you saw something in him that even he didn't see. She let go of his hand. Rest now. I have a council to dismantle. Kaya turned and walked out of the room. She didn't look back. She had made her peace. Now she had to make war. The final council chamber was a sphere of floating platforms suspended over a gravity well. It was designed to intimidate, to make anyone standing in the center feel like they were hanging over an abyss. Lord Kalen stood on the central podium, surrounded by the holographic projections of the 12 high houses. The air was filled with the murmur of digital votes. "The traitor Kaya Drath has breached the perimeter," Kalen announced, his voice amplified to boom through the chamber. "She leads a rabble of slaves and murderers. She comes to destroy our way of life." He raised his hands. "I call for a vote of emergency powers. We must authorize the fleet to bombard the citadel. We must purge the infection." The holograms flickered. Bombard the citadel. It was madness. It would kill them all. "It is a necessary sacrifice," Kalen shouted, his eyes wide with the manic desperation of a man who knows the walls are closing in. The doors to the chamber didn't open. They exploded. Debris rained down into the gravity well. Through the smoke, Kaya walked onto the central walkway. She was alone, or she seemed alone. Behind her, the shadows moved. Ronan Vale stepped out, his pulse rifle leveled, and behind him, filling the corridor, were the people, not soldiers, cooks, cleaners, mechanics. They poured into the chamber, lining the walkways, a silent, staring jury of the oppressed. Kalen froze. "Guards, kill them!" The council guards raised their weapons, but they didn't fire. They looked at the mob. They looked at Ronan, whose hand was glowing with a light that matched the ancient legends. They looked at Kaya, who walked with the silence of a ghost. "Stand down," Kaya ordered. It wasn't a shout. It was a statement of fact. She tapped her brace. "Connect to the central spire." She commanded the relic, broadcast on all frequencies. Above the podium, the massive holographic screens that usually showed vote tallies flickered and changed. They didn't show Kaya. They showed data. Streams of financial records scrolled by. Bribes paid by House Kalen to the captains of the guard. Assassination orders signed with Kalen's digital key. And finally, a medical report from the toxicology scanner in Vale's private room, identifying the poison in the Warlord's blood as a compound manufactured in Kalen's own laboratories. "Lies!" Kalen screamed, backing away. "Deep fakes!" Kaya walked forward, her steps silent, her presence deafening. "Is the poison a fake?" "Uncle," Kaya asked, "is the order to kill me a fake?" She gestured to the screens. "Every citizen in Karzul is seeing this. Every soldier, every slave. You didn't save the Warlord. You murdered him to take a seat you were too weak to earn." The holograms of the high houses began to disconnect one by one, the nobles abandoning the sinking ship. Kalen looked around, wild-eyed. He had lost the narrative. He had lost the political support. He had one card left. "The fleet!" he screamed, pulling a command remote from his robes. "I command the orbital fleet. Target this chamber. Fire!" He mashed his thumb onto the red button. Nothing happened. Silence stretched in the vast chamber. Kalen pressed the button again, and again. "Why aren't they firing?" he shrieked. "Because you don't command the fleet," Ronan said. Ronan stepped up beside Kaya. He raised his right hand. The bond mark was blazing with white-hot intensity. Kaya raised her left leg, the brace glowing in unison. "The throne key requires 2 signatures," Ronan said, his voice echoing. "One from the blood of the Drath, one from the blood of the Terra Prime Treaty." He looked at Kalen with pity. "You are trying to drive a car without the key." "Kalen." Ronan looked at Kaya. They nodded. "System command," Ronan said. "Authentication recognized." The automated voice of the Citadel computer boomed. "Primary and secondary users confirmed." Lock all fleet weapons in defensive neutral. Ronan ordered. Zero aggression. Command accepted. Fleet is locked. Kalen dropped the remote. It clattered on the floor, the sound tiny and pathetic. It is over, Kaya said. Kalen looked at the guards. He looked at the mob. He realized there was no escape. He drew a dagger from his belt, his hand shaking. I will not be judged by a cripple and a slave, he shouted, lunging at Kaya. Kaya didn't flinch. She didn't even draw her weapon. Ronan moved, but he didn't strike Kalen. He simply stepped in the path, catching Kalen's wrist in midair. He twisted. The dagger fell into the abyss below. Ronan shoved Kalen backward. The coup leader fell to the floor, sprawling at the feet of the people he had planned to enslave. Two former kitchen workers stepped forward, grabbing Kalen by the arms. They didn't beat him. They held him. Kaya stood over him. The coup is collapsed, she announced. The room erupted. It wasn't a cheer of victory, it was a roar of release. The tension that had held the city in a chokehold for weeks snapped. A loyalist general stepped forward, drawing his pistol. Allow me to execute the traitor. Princess, he said. No, Kaya said. The general paused. He is a regicide. The punishment is death. Kaya looked at Kalen, who was sobbing on the floor. Death is too easy, Kaya said. Death makes him a martyr. She looked at the cameras, addressing the city. We are done with death as a spectacle. I sentence him to truth. She pointed at Kalen. He will stand trial, publicly. He will testify to every bribe, every murder, every backroom deal. He will work in the mines he tried to fill with slaves until he has repaid the debt of the treasury he stole. She turned to the crowd, and as for the system he tried to protect. She looked at Ronan. Burn it down, Ronan said softly. Kaya nodded. The slave collar program is dismantled, effective immediately, she declared. Every collar on Karzul is to be deactivated. Every debt is void. The roar that followed shook the foundations of the citadel. It was the sound of history breaking its chains. An hour later, the suns were setting, casting a triple shadow over the great hall. The fighting had stopped. The city was in a state of stunned, euphoric shock. Kaya stood on the central dais. Vile's loyalists had secured the perimeter. The council members who hadn't fled were standing in uncertain silence, waiting to see what the new ruler would do. Kaya turned to Ronan. He was standing a few feet away, leaning against a pillar, cleaning the soot from his armor. He looked tired. He looked like a man who wanted to sleep for a week. Kaya activated the microphone. Citizens of Karzul, she said. The room went quiet. My father bonded me to this man as a strategy, she said, her voice clear. He called it ownership. He called him a shield. She walked over to Ronan. She stopped in front of him. But a shield is something you hide behind, she said. And I am done hiding. She looked Ronan in the eyes. Ronan Vale, she said. I dissolve the bond of the Warlord. Gasps rippled through the room. Ronan went still. You are free, Kaya said. You have no obligation to House Drath. You have no obligation to me. She took a breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was the terrifying part, the part without the armor. But she continued, her voice softening. I am asking you to stay. She held out her hand. Not as a slave, not as a consort, as a partner, as my equal in rule and in life. She waited. The entire court waited. Ronan looked at her hand. He looked at the woman who had fought beside him in the void, who had run on walls, who had chosen him when the world told her he was nothing. He stepped forward. He didn't take her hand. He knelt, not on two knees, like a servant, on one knee, like a knight. I accept, Ronan said, his voice rough with emotion. On one condition. Kaya raised an eyebrow. Name it. Freedom, Ronan said. For everyone. No more stabilizers. No more indentured service. If we rule a free world. Kaya smiled. It was a smile that reached her eyes, breaking the mask of the princess forever. Agreed, she said. Ronan stood up. He took her hand. Then I am yours, he said, and you are mine. The applause was not polite. It was raucous. It was messy. It was real. Epilogue. 6 months later. The Nighthawk sat on the private landing pad of the Citadel, its organic hull gleaming with health. It was being prepped for a diplomatic tour of the outer systems. Kaya sat in the cockpit, running a diagnostic on her brace. It was quiet now, a seamless part of her. Ronan walked in, carrying 2 crates of supplies. We are heavy on the starboard side, Kaya noted without looking up. I brought extra rations, Ronan said, sliding into the co-pilot seat. You get grumpy when you're hungry. I do not get grumpy, Kaya said. I get tectonically unstable. Analysis complete. The ship's AI chirped suddenly. Combat mating synergy is currently at 100%. Dopamine levels suggest optimal conditions for reproductive protocols. Shall I dim the lights? Kaya froze. She stared at the console. Ronan burst out laughing. It wasn't a chuckle. It was a full, belly-shaking laugh that echoed in the cockpit. Kaya tried to hold it in. She bit her lip. She glared at the screen. But the sheer absurdity of it, the lightness of the moment after so many years of darkness, broke through. She laughed. It was a bright, cascading sound, unpracticed and free. She laughed until her sides hurt, until tears streamed down her face. The court officials outside, loading the cargo, stopped and looked up. They had never heard the Warlord, no, the Chancellor laugh before. It was a shocking sound. It sounded like humanity. Kaya wiped her eyes, leaning back in the chair. We are going to have to wipe that AI. She gasped. Keep it. Ronan grinned, leaning over to brush his thumb across her knuckles. It has good taste. They launched into the sunrise of Karzul. Below them, the city was changing. The slave pits were being filled in to make gardens. The arena was silent. Kaya watched the horizon. She had learned the hardest lessons in the darkest places. She knew now that strength without compassion was just cruelty in a uniform. She had seen it in Kalen. She knew that pride without vulnerability was a lonely cage. She had lived in it for years. She knew that love without consent was theft. She had fought to reclaim it. And she knew. As she looked at the man beside her, that power used to protect the weak was the only legacy worth leaving. They walked out of the ship's mind and into the future. Kaya's walk was not perfect. The brace still hummed a soft, mechanical rhythm. She would never be effortless. But she was unbowed. Ronan stood beside her, their shoulders brushing. Their hands were not quite touching, but the space between them was electric with a promise kept. The tribunal lights of the stars bloomed under their feet. The city watched them rise, not as a princess and a slave, but as the architects of a new dawn.